This is episode 55 of the Why Not Me podcast, Personality Blueprint Part 6, Find Your Why. I'm your host, Denita Bremer. I'm a wife, mom, member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and a life coach. And I believe when you know who you are, you can be the best you at what you're called to do. This requires faith, wisdom, and mental wellness. That's what we talk about here. Okay, the universe seems to be conspiring against me to get this episode to you, so I'm not sure why. But I'm here now. I think everything's working. I've had multiple issues, but I think we can do this. Okay. So Find Your Why is an exercise that comes from Simon Sinek. He's pretty well known in self-development circles. He's written several books, but he does come from a more corporate world. He kind of coaches and works with organizations and bigger companies on their mission statements and things like that. And so I've kind of taken his work and applied it to myself as an individual and thought about how I can use it with just kind of quote unquote normal people, like stay-at-home moms, right? I personally have found this exercise to be very powerful. I have a mastermind that I run, a bunch of us coaches who are all Latter-day Saints. I put it out to them. I said, hey, I'm reading Simon Sinek's book. He actually has 2 books on Find Your Why. The first one is about why you should want to find your why and the value of it. And the second one is like a workbook that takes you through the exercise. And he basically tells you how to take somebody through this exercise and what to look for and what to say and all of those kinds of things. And so I posed this to my mastermind. I said, hey, I'd really love to do this exercise. Would anybody like to take me through it? And in exchange, I'd be happy to take you through the why exercise if you're interested in doing that. And so a good coach friend of mine, shout out to Tyson Bradley, took me through this exercise for me to find my why. And Simon Sinek, in his book, he says, don't try to do this exercise on your own. Like, you can go through some of the questions and you can figure things out, but you're not going to be objective enough to be able to see some of the commonalities and the golden threads that sort of tie the themes to different stories in your life together. And we'll get a little bit to the actual exercise. And so even though I was tempted, to be honest, to do it on my own, I thought, no, I'll just have somebody else do it. The problem is that he recommends that you set aside 2 to 5 hours, uninterrupted hours. Now you can take breaks and, go to the bathroom and get a drink of water and things like that. But he recommends a longer stretch of time so that you just feel really free to explore and to tell your stories and things like that. So that logistically can get a little bit tricky. So we set aside 2 hours. And it's kind of interesting. I was listening to Simon Sinek's book on a road trip. And as he was explaining, the purpose and how to do this, I knew the stories already. And I'll get into that a little bit in a minute. But so I kind of had this idea that I thought I sort of knew what my why was going to be, but it was very powerful to have a friend take me through it, and a coach friend at that, somebody who knows how to hold space, knows how to be curious, knows, when to dig a little deeper and when to let things go. And so I kind of blubbered through the whole thing, but it was a very powerful exercise for me, which is why I have brought it into my personality blueprint. It's not really about personality. It's more about identity and purpose. It's basically the Find Your Why exercise is basically to get to a one statement that talks about your contribution and impact in the world, kind of who you are and how you are and what you're doing when you are at your natural best. And when you know this statement, and it can change and fluctuate over time because we're humans, we change and fluctuate over time. It helps to kind of focus your life, right? We all have so many decisions, way more to do in a 24-hour period than any of us can get to. And so when you know what your why is, and this is sort of your overarching purpose statement for your life, and it's not like you have a why for your family and a why for personal things and a why for work. It's one overarching statement. So in that way, it can be very general, but there also can be some potency in it. then it helps you to make decisions and to focus your actions. That's what I have found helpful for it. And really, I have noticed it has just helped me see this purpose show up in my life over and over again. And before going through this exercise, like I kind of knew, that yeah, I'm this person of faith and this and that, but I couldn't see so clearly how exactly this purpose statement shows up in my life. Okay, so the why exercise, I've kind of hinted at it, is an exercise where you examine moments or stories or experiences in your life when you're showing up at your natural best. And then you look at what was it about, like say we get to 3 to 5 stories or moments in your life. What was it about those moments that compelled you or drove you forward or defined you, right? So we're kind of searching for the 5 most impactful or meaningful stories or moments in your life. And then what you do when you tell those to your friend who is an objective outside observer, your friend who takes you through this exercise helps to show you, they kind of say, oh, here's what I'm seeing. This is sort of the thread that I noticed. I noticed you said this word a lot. I noticed you use this phrase a lot. And I'm tying these 2 stories together, right? And so there's this sort of golden thread that weaves itself through all of these moments in your life. And then you quantify that golden thread in a statement that has a very specific formula. Simon Sinek says it's 2 and then fill in the blank with your contribution, so that, and then fill in the blank with your impact. And it's not like this just comes out of this session easily. It's sort of a work in progress. It's something you mull over, you think about, you maybe have a starting point once you go through this why exercise, but then you might spend the next several months or maybe even years like really refining it and defining it. So it's kind of a in pencil kind of statement, a work in progress. Simon Sinek says to do this exercise with a friend, to not try to do it on your own, because you can't really be an objective observer of your own self. You are in the stories and you are subjective about it. When I did this exercise, I cried. It was like almost like the spirit was with me a lot. And so I couldn't be objective. And, and I've told stories from my life. If you look at the first 40 episodes of this podcast, I'm well-versed at telling stories from my life. And I know these stories inside and out. And what Tyson did for me as he observed and listened was that he asked questions that nobody has ever asked me before. And he really made me kind of slow down and think about, specific moments and why was that important? What was it about that? Right. And Simon Sinek in his, one of his books about this why exercise, he actually walks you through what questions to ask and what to look for and how to say it and how not to say it, those kinds of things. He does a very good job of outlining for the coach, the person who is the objective observer, the curious questioner, what to say and how to say it. So and he offers a slew of questions to kind of help you dig into a person's stories and moments from their lives that show kind of their purpose statement, their why from these moments. So the one thing I will say is that it does take a little bit, like it's a bigger chunker of time, a bigger chunk of time. And that logistically might be difficult for some people. So I'm going to go through the questions that I have. I have a note on my computer that's just for the why exercise. And just to kind of give you a feel for what kinds of questions you're asking, but these really are just questions that are starting points. And then from there, like you're supposed to let your curiosity, take over and ask questions and just really just be curious. But again, this is to try to get to about 5 stories from your life or so that are the most impactful or meaningful stories or moments in your life or people. And as a side note, I have taken a few people through this exercise, and a couple of them they were nervous about it because they said, I don't have very good memory. Like, I don't remember my childhood very well. Like, my earliest memories are like in my teenagers. And so I just kind of worked with that. And one thing I noticed was that some people's memories function a little bit different. So one of my clients that I took through this exercise, her memories are really hooked onto place. And I don't think that's a bad thing. I think it's just something to be aware of, that not everybody remembers details about their childhood or meaningful experiences. But I do think that everybody remembers important things to them, right? It's just to be careful not to come at it with your own point of view on what types of things are important. Okay, so the first kind of exercise you can do to get to these, what are my 5 most meaningful stories in my life, is a peaks and valleys exercise where you put your life out on a timeline and you just put sort of like big events or meaningful events or turning points in your life. And if they're a positive event, like a happy memory, like maybe the day you got married or something like that, then you write a line above this horizontal line, you write a vertical line, right? So you would have a horizontal line from the date of your birth to today, and that kind of delineates the years or the months. And then we're putting events vertically above and below this line as a timeline. And so the peaks would represent good times in your life, positive memories, happy, joyful, whatever, accomplishments, those kinds of things. And the valleys, the moments that go below the line are, maybe the sad, difficult moments. So we call this peaks and valleys. And then you kind of take a look at those peaks and valleys and you think about what, 2, maybe 3 events were the highest of the highs, or maybe even just what one event is the highest of the high, and what events are the lowest of the lows. And those tend to be very insightful moments for this kind of an exercise. So that's kind of not really questions, but an exercise that you can do. And then the rest are kind of memory prompts. So who in your life has helped make you the person you are today? And maybe a specific time where they exemplified what you most admire about them. So I have an episode on the podcast from Mr. Thornton, who was a high school teacher of mine. And basically that whole episode is a person who helped make me who I am today, and specifically what they did and how he made me feel and all of that, right? And I think that episode actually came out of doing this why exercise. I thought, I should talk about some of the important people in my life. Here's another question, or some of these are statements. Think of a day at work where you said, I would have done that for free. Or if you are a stay-at-home mom, a stay-at-home parent, think of a day at work, with your kids where you just felt really fulfilled and thought, gosh, that's exactly what I want my life to be like. And then think of the worst day at work. What happened? Why was it the worst day? What is your earliest specific happy childhood memory? That one can really point in the direction of who you are at your natural best. An experience you loved at school. What was it? What were you doing? Who were you with? Why did you love it? Any pivotal moments in your life, moments where you realize nothing would ever be the same. So if you've been listening to my podcast from the beginning, one of the very earliest memories is about when my mom died, and this moment when my sister came to me in the hall of the hospital and said, I just don't know if I can believe in God anymore. And it was such a pivotal moment. And I even knew it in that moment that it was a pivotal moment. And so that is one of the stories that I used in my why exercise. How about this one? Things that made you think about the world and your role in it differently. I don't know if I've ever told this story on the podcast. My sister, my next oldest sister, and I, we've had kind of a rocky relationship where there have been good times and not so good times. And I remember there was this moment when she was going to come visit, and I was getting a little anxious about her visiting. And I was in my head about, how this was going to go. And I just had this moment when I was like, I just need to be her sister. And it was like, I was able to release in that moment this role that I had played like during our childhood and my teenage years of I had to be responsible for her. I had to watch out for her, like because my mom like specifically asked me to, but I didn't really want to. Right. And so there were times when I felt really resentful toward her. And at this point, when I had this moment, we were both adults. We were young adults. We were in our early 20s. And I was, like I just had like not the best relationship with her. And I wanted to have a better relationship. And I just had this moment of realization that all I had to do was be her sister. I didn't have to be her mom anymore. And that was such a freeing moment for me. But it was one of those moments that made me think about my role as a sister differently. Here's another one. A time you gave of yourself to help someone else, maybe a time that made you feel unbelievably good, like you were making an impact, right? These can be times when stories that we have from our lives when we help someone else. It could be when we're a young child or when we're an adult. That doesn't matter. We all have some experience like this. And it really, when we are giving of ourselves, of course, that's part of when we're at our natural best. But each of us individually has those moments that are meaningful to us, right? Like we might have times when we helped like stand up to a bully or stand up for somebody, right? Like those moments that maybe we don't remember, they kind of run into the background of our lives. But we all have one or two moments when we're like, oh, I remember that time when I did that thing and that was just crazy and weird and whatever, right? There are moments that stand out to us ourselves, and somebody else, maybe a sibling or a cousin or a friend was the beneficiary of a time when we did something for somebody else, but we don't even remember it, right? So part of this exercise are the things that are meaningful to you, the things that stand out in your mind. Okay, next one is who helped you? Who cheered you on? Who was waiting at the finish line? I took a coach friend of mine through this exercise and she was like, nobody is ever waiting at the finish line for me. It's all me all the time. And she didn't say it in like a selfish way or anything. She just was like very matter of fact, like there really isn't anyone in my life who's cheering me on and waiting at the finish line. I do that for myself. And that was part of her why, right? What have you accomplished that you are really proud of? Who was there? Why were you so proud? I took somebody else through this exercise and she talked about an assignment in college that was like, she was supposed to kind of design a few pages of a magazine and she had to write all the copy in it and everything as well. So it was the design, but also the writing. And she was so proud of it. Like she knew that she had done a really good job and she turned it in. And then her professor said like, wow, this is really one of the best I've ever seen. And I've been doing this for many years. And she just felt so proud of herself. And so we really dug into like, what exactly about that experience made you so proud? And it was interesting because she was so proud of it. And then she went and told her brother about it. And he told her to not get a big head. So it was like, it was this really positive experience that was tainted with like some shame or some sadness. And then just in general, what experiences have made you proud? And don't be surprised if you reflect on that question and it's like a tiny little thing. I know I've mentioned this on the podcast multiple times, but flossing my teeth every day, like I am just so proud of that because that is like something I decided and I went after it and nobody helped me. I did it all on my own and I'm really proud of it. So it's just like a little thing. It's not like some grand, I built a house or I started a nonprofit or something like that. We tend to think of those kind of bigger experiences as the ones we're proud of, but sometimes they could be really small. Okay. So those are kind of a smattering of the questions that I start with when I take somebody through their why, find your why exercise. And really, those are just starting points. As they start talking about their lives and the experiences that they've had, I allow myself to just get curious and be like, tell me more about that. What about that? And if any emotion comes up, then we talk about that. Like, why is this bringing emotion up for you? It doesn't always, but sometimes. So I wanted to talk about my takeaways from my experience. The first takeaway is that I knew what stories I would tell almost immediately as I was listening to Simon Sinek's book on this road trip. And he's talking about like how to take somebody through this process. I was like, oh, I know my top 3 for sure. And then it didn't take me long to come up with 2 more as a top 5. And as I have taken, I think I've taken 5 people through this process. That is kind of a unique thing. I didn't have to like really reflect very long. And I don't know if that's because I have a podcast where I tell stories from my life, or if that's just kind of part of who I am. I am very introspective, and I've always like kept a journal, and I don't know. I think I've just always kind of had stories from my life sort of at the forefront of my mind. So that was kind of just like an interesting thing to note. My number 2 takeaway was that I thought that I could kind of take myself through the process, even though Simon Sinek is like, don't do it. I know you think you can, don't do it. I thought I had sort of an idea of what my why was, and I wasn't wrong. I wasn't off. But Tyson taking me through this process, like it was so much better than what I could have done on my own. He was so much more objective and like had words for things that I was like, oh, yeah, you're right. I never saw it that way, but that's like, that's right. And I'll tell you what my why statement is in a moment, but he really helped me characterize my experiences in a way that felt true to me, but also felt objective. Like, yes, you are characterizing this in a way that's true and concise. And, as you can tell, I always have a lot of words. My number 3 takeaway is that knowing my why has really helped me in my business. And it took me some time to get there. I did this why exercise probably almost 6 months ago now. And then a couple months later, I was on a coaching call with a business coach. And she told me something, and I'll tell you all of this in a minute, but I don't want to hint at it all. And I was like, oh yeah, why didn't I see that before? And then I immediately thought of my why. And I was like, oh my gosh, I need to bring my why like more consciously, more explicitly into my business. And it helps me to feel good about the things I'm doing in my business. And to, like I said, it helps me to kind of like focus and make decisions. And because there are a million things that I would love to do in my business, and I only have so much time. And so I have to prioritize. And the why really helps me see what to push up on the priority list and what to let go of. And then the last takeaway is that this is just kind of a silly one, but I remember thinking as a kid when I would go to sacrament meeting, it was fast and testimony meeting, like, why do people cry? Right. And then when I had my experience, when I asked in prayer, I asked God, to give me a testimony. And I actually had this very concrete experience where I know that Joseph Smith was a prophet. One of the ways that I knew that that was a spiritual experience, and it wasn't just me making something up in my mind, was that I got really choked up with emotion, and I was in a public place. And so that was kind of rare for me. And ever since then, like I get really choked up when I feel the Spirit. And this why exercise, it was like basically me feeling the Spirit and blubbering and crying through it the whole time. And Tyson asked me, he's like, what do you think you're feeling right now? Like, why are you so emotional? And I kind of was taken aback by that. And I was like, well, I'm just feeling the Spirit. But for whatever reason, I kept thinking about that question, even after our 2-hour session. And I had a realization not too much longer, probably within the next couple of weeks. And I thought, oh, you know what I'm feeling when I get choked up like this? I've always just called it feeling the Spirit, right? This is what I do when I feel the Spirit. But what it is like an intense gratitude. And that has helped me since then. That was a few months ago. I think about that anytime I feel emotion anytime tears come to my eyes, especially like in a church meeting or in some kind of spiritual way. And I think about how really what that is me feeling this intense gratitude. I've never really thought of myself as like gratitude being one of my fortes. But now that I see it this way, I'm like, yeah, I think that really is what it is. It's like, it's almost a gratitude because you know that it's not you. You know that you're just the vessel and that God is working in you. And yeah, I can even kind of feel that now, right? Okay, so my why statement, and again, this is a work in progress. The beginning part, the contribution part is really clear to me. And this is the part that I knew like, oh, it has something to do with faith. But Tyson helped me as he took me through this. He helped me to see that it's not just faith, but it's a commitment to faith. So the beginning of my sentence, remember it's to, and then fill in the blank with your contribution, to commit to faith. And when I say that, when I think about that, it just rings so true to me in my body. Like I get like a visceral reaction to it. Now, the back end of this sentence is the one that I have struggled with a little bit more. So I've tried on a lot of different phrases, but the one that I've kind of settled on for now is so that I can be an instrument in God's hands, to commit to faith so that I can be an instrument in God's hands. Now, if you go and read Simon Sinek's book, or you go research him on social media and hear him talking about the why exercise, his statement is something like to inspire others it's like to inspire others to be inspiring or something like that, so that peace can be felt in the world or something like that, something about peace in the world. And my statement, and this is something I've also noticed, and it's a question I have for Simon himself, actually. My statement feels very focused on me. And I think I've thought about this a lot. And I think what that means is that I am just meant to be an example in some way. And that my work is to continue to commit to this path of faith so that I can feel this like spiritual freedom or feel like I'm doing the right thing. And I've talked about this a little before on the podcast, right versus good. When I feel like I'm doing the right thing, it doesn't necessarily feel good. This comes up a lot in parenting, right? When we have to, or we decide to have a consequence, a negative consequence for our kids for some behavior that they have exhibited. It might feel like the right thing. It doesn't necessarily feel good to do that. And as I reflect on the experiences in my life where it was really this commitment to faith that was being highlighted, it didn't feel good, but it felt right. And so it's like this, I know I'm on the right path. I know that I'm doing the right thing by God. And that's the part that I've kind of had a hard time putting to words, to commit to faith so that I know I'm doing the right thing, something like that. And it doesn't feel like, when I say it that way, it doesn't feel like it's an impact on the world. But just imagine if half of the world, right? Almost 8 billion people on earth. Imagine if 4 billion people were committed to a path of faith, of trying to figure out what God wants for them and then doing that. That would be pretty powerful, right? It would change our world. And so I'm allowing this to evolve, and maybe someday I'll have an opportunity to ask Simon Sinek about that, because it feels to me like it's very me-centric, which doesn't necessarily feel bad. It feels resonant to me that and maybe it's because I'm an introvert. I don't know. There could be a lot of different factors at play here, but it feels like my job is to just keep my commitment to faith and then just let the chips fall from there. All right. That's what I have for you about the Find Your Why exercise, I wanted to give you a little update because you're probably wondering, like, why is she telling us all these things about these different personality frameworks? And so if this series has been interesting or helpful to you, I am going to turn this into a workbook that you can do on your own. Not all of the frameworks can be applied completely on your own, like this why exercise. I don't recommend doing it on your own. You can brainstorm and think of the different stories on your own, but I really highly recommend having somebody take you through that process. I am going to be offering kind of one-off sessions if you want just that. It's very powerful. I will offer those. I don't have that all set up in my back end yet, but if that's something that's interesting to you, then reach out and schedule a free session. We can talk about that, and we can talk about timing and schedule, logistics, those kinds of things. But I do want to turn all of these 6 tools as a review: Gretchen Rubin's 4 tendencies, the Myers-Briggs, the Enneagram, Clifton Strengths, values, and then Find Your Why. I want to turn this into a workbook that you can do on your own, with the help of, free resources online, and you can do some discovery on your own, right? I mean, this is the work I've been kind of doing in my life over the past 15, 20 years. And I think it's really useful to have it like written down and that you can refer back to. I am going to be turning this into a coaching package. I don't know how many weeks it'll be. I've been tossing around 3 weeks or 6 weeks, and somewhere around there, probably around 6 weeks. But I'm not quite ready to roll that out yet. So I do encourage you to get on my email list. If that is something that's interesting to you, then you can find out when that is ready to go. By the way, I have been actually allowing some rest during this holiday season. So my kind of loose goal is to have the workbook, the personality blueprint workbook, done by the end of January. I do have something going on right now though. And this is part of my commitment to faith. Is I let God into my business, and I ask him what I should do and how I should do it. And this is something that came up, and I considered it for a few weeks, and finally I'm just deciding to dive into it. I am offering what I'm calling the 1% Habits group. It's a Facebook group where I will help you identify what are some micro habits that you want to work on for this first quarter of the year. And it comes from James Clear's Atomic Habits, the book that he wrote that is all about incremental progress. And he's quoted in General Conference by Elder Dunn, and his talk is called 1% Better. And I thought, if this is really the way, because this lines up with the gospel, right? By small and simple means, or line upon line, precept upon precept, those kinds of things. If this is the way that God wants us to grow and develop, why are we not doing that? And maybe you are, and I say kudos to you, but it has not been the approach that I have taken in my self-development. I tend to get really gung-ho and get really excited and go full force, and then my energy kind of tapers. And so this is something that I wanted for myself. I wanted to set 1 or 2 very small kind of daily habits, kind of like what I did with my flossing, and allow those to snowball into something bigger. And so I just decided to put together a group. We're on Facebook. It's kind of a beta group right now because I'm not exactly sure. I'm exploring, I'm experimenting. I just posted this for the first time yesterday, and I already have 5 people in the group. It's a steal. It's only $25 for 3 months. Part of the reason is because it's a beta and I'm not quite sure, how it's going to turn out. And part of the reason is just because I really wanted it to be easy and light. And that's what felt easy and light to me, just like a really low cost. Let's just identify 1 or 2 habits, and then I'll coach you through that. I'll help you, identify those habits, take you through a process. I already have in there in the group a process called ADVANCE, ADVANCE. They all stand for something to help you set goals that are reasonable. Because if you're anything like me, it's like these goals, these dreams that you have never seem to quite take off the ground. And I think it's because we do too much too fast instead of inching our way and creating sustainable incremental change. Okay, so that's something you can go to my website. Actually, it's so new, it's not even on my website, but I do have it on Instagram. And I have a link. I'll link to it in the show notes. Basically, if you're interested in that, you can just pay your $25 and then I'll send you the link for the Facebook group and we'll just get going. Or you can email me or reach out over social media if you have any questions about that. That's enough for now. And so are you. If this episode made you think about yourself or others in a new way, would you please give it a rating and a review? And if you want to truly do the work of being the best you at what you do, go to denitabremer.com to schedule a free session with me. Until next time, go be you and follow the Spirit.